Okay, so what we got here is commission to make a table out of it. The problem with this slab is it is 2 inches on one side and 2 7/8 on the other side. So there's a lot of material that has to be removed here. You can see the chainsaw cuts and all that. But first what I had to do is finish this crack out. I am going to bust this whole slab right in half because they want a nice clear epoxy resin right down the middle. So we're going to try and crack this thing in half. I'm really not sure how I'm going to do it or how it's going to go, but well, that was pretty easy. Okay, so now I want that bark. I need to save that. So now this table is going to set up. I'm probably going to set it up, I'd say just like that. Probably be pretty cool. And that's going to make it a, what, 33 by almost 3 foot. 33 inches by 3 foot table when it's all said and done. So I'm going to set up the router sled and get to work on knocking this thing down and making it even all the way across. I ought to bring it back in when I get it all set up. Okay, so this is the setup that I use. It's nothing fancy. It's just flat and level. So this is a old tabletop that I converted into a router sled. This is the sled part. Router goes in here. A couple things you have to remember. Everything has to be stable and not able to move. So the way you do that is after your table, I clamp this to this table, and then to secure the piece, you don't want it moving when you're pushing a router or you're really going to have a lot of trouble. So I use on all 4 points of whatever I'm routing, I just lock it down, and you make them easily removable so you can you know, move it around. So that piece is solid as can be. The router is nothing fancy either. I use a what they call a sweeper bit. It just cleans it from the bottom and the top. Nothing fancy here either. You just lock that in. Now you do have to have a router that's adjustable up and down, so you can adjust to the wood. There you go. Now you just lock that in. Here's your sled. And you know, depending on what kind of router you have, your adjustments are on here. Okay, so you can only take off, you know, an 1/8 inch is a lot. So it does take a lot of time. So you just have to look down there and see where you're going to be. You can even get a little bit lower. You have micro adjustments on your router. I start out with it just touching the wood. You lock it in. The cord goes out of your way. Eye protection is a must. And you just start running it back and forth, nice and easy. As you can see, I've already taken off, you know, 3/16 of an inch is good. So I'm going to knock this high point off, and then this particular piece has a crown in the middle, so I'm just trying to get the one side flat so I can flip it over and then start working from there. So we're going to go into hyperspeed so you're not sitting there for 4 hours. Okay, so now we're at a point where it's fairly flat. Now we start bringing it together. It's not level, but at least it's flat, so it'll lay flat on the table. I took out, there's no more rock in it or anything like that. So first thing we have to do is remove the stabilizers, what I call them. Take your piece off completely. You set that aside and you brush out your table. Be prepared for a lot of wood chips and sawdust. Okay, good, nice, flat, clean surface. Bring the table back in. We'll put the side down that we already did. See where we're at. Now she's pretty solid on the table. I'm going to turn it so my router can hit all the spots. It's like right about there. Actually, gotta go like that. Get that out of there. Okay. So you can see there's a big saw gash right here we have to take care of. We're going to eliminate that first. And we're really going to make this one perfectly flat and then flip it back over and then bring it up to thickness all the way through. So stabilizers go back on. Remember, all 4 points. You have to lock it down. If nothing else, for your own safety, you don't want that router flipping out of your hand. That one, and then we'll have one more all the way back here. Oops, lost my tip. Okay, so that's that. Now it's in there nice and tight, not going to move on us. Bring in the sled. We're going to, like I said, we're going to work on this end piece right here. There's like almost a 1/4 inch. So we're going to knock that off, and then we'll see where we're at. You'll notice I did change a few things on my table. Like I said, I'm no real woodworker. I just know how to do things, you know, on my own. What happened is I ran out of adjustment on my router, so you can very easily bring the table up to your work. I used 2 runners that were 3/4 of an inch, so now I have a lot more adjustment up and down. So that's where we're at now. I knocked that end piece off, so now we're going to start right here, just taking off 1/8 of an inch each time until we get down to the lowest spot, and then we'll make one final pass to flatten this completely out, and then we'll see where we're at as far as thickness goes. Okay, here we go. we're at the point where we have both pieces pretty much flattened out and mostly the same. So now I have to make two decisions. I have to decide how big of a gap that I want to make. This is all the owner of this table wants this all crystal clear all the way through so they can see right through it. So usually when you break a table like that, there's a lot of unevenness going on the edges, but because of the shape of this table, I'm just going to use a clear piece of plexiglass and just follow this curve around, and then I'll sand that smooth till it's clear. So that's not a problem, but I think that keeping with relations to how big the table is this way, we got 34 inches this way, and at the widest point here we're right at almost 34, so I might just scooch it out just a little bit more, and that's probably going to be the whole table. 34 by 34 roughly, something like that. Now the next decision we have to make is which side do we think is the best. Right now, to me, this would be the back side. So we're going to flip it over and see what it looks like on the other side. So going end to end, keeping the pieces the way they go together, would be just like that. So to me, we'll check the measurement. I'm about 34 right there, so I think pretty much you scooch it up a little bit more. That's probably going to be it, the finished product. This side I think is a little bit better. I got a little bit of a dip here that I'm going to have to work on. I'm going to have to see how far, how much more I have to do. I thought I was done with the routing, but I got a little less than a 1/4 inch. So if you bring them together, this one already is a little bit, and that's pretty much the same all the way through, but you can see that 1/4 inch has to be made up somewhere. Other than that, it's pretty nice and flat right there. So if I take a 1/4 inch off of this side, that means I'm going to have to take another 1/4 inch off this side. Now I'm getting kind of thin on where I want to be. Right now I'm at 1 inch and 5/8 thick, which is, you know, pretty much the minimum on what I wanted to do. 1 inch and 5/8 on the low end. Of course, it's 1 inch and 3/4 on this end. Brother. Well, I guess it's just going to have to take a little more routing to get this bad spot right out of here. Okay. All right, so that's going to have to be done. Right now, we have to take the time to clean up the ends. You can use a wire brush. I like to use a wire wheel on the drill. And really, this is not too bad. They want it as rough, or as rustic, I should say. Not so much rough, but natural as possible. But you do have to remove the loose stuff. Stuff like these little chips right here, they got to go, because they're only going to create problems, trap air bubbles, and then they'll, when you're sleeping waiting for it to dry, the air bubbles leak out and then come to the top. So that has to be addressed. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to clean these ends up first. Okay, so this is what I use. It's just a standard drill with a wire wheel on it. The thing about these wire wheels is they love to fly off and stick in your face or your eye. So I suggest a face mask and a pair of safety glasses as usual. Otherwise you won't be able to watch videos. And it hurts like hell when you stick one of these babies in your face. But generally, that's it. Now this wheel does not remove any wood. It only removes the loose stuff. And this is how we go, just like this. Okay, so now we're at a point where all the inside edges are cleaned up of all the loose stuff. We're going to leave these little doodads or whatever because they want it to look pretty natural, that it was split just like a piece of lightning came down and hit this table and cracked it right in half. That's the look that they're going for. So that's what I'm going to try and duplicate. Now I'm working from, keep in mind that I am working from the back side of the table right now. This is the bottom of the table. And I guess you're wondering how I'm going to keep it together so I could pour this whole thing without it leaking all over the floor. And the way that I do it is I use plexiglass. Now this is a high density 3/16 plexiglass, and I've used it before on other tables. Now you have to keep, they say that the epoxy won't stick to the plexiglass, but it really does. So you have to take other precautions. You know, removing all the debris, so you want a nice tight fit. And I use, I don't have any mold release, so I use a paste wax. I just rub it right where the epoxy is going to go, and just by doing that, we'll keep it from bonding to the epoxy, the plexiglass. That'll keep it popped off. Okay, so that's done. So now we're going to flip it over and we're going to center it right over top of where the river's going to go. And that looks good right there. So before we do anything to that respect, we're going to let that dry for a couple minutes. And I'll put it off to the side. Now to seal it, to keep it from flowing this way, because if there is any kind of gap whatsoever, it is definitely going to leak no matter what you do. So to take precautions, I use a 100% silicone, and I'm just going to come in just an inch or so from the edge, and I'm just going to run a nice bead of silicone right along this edge. And my caulk gun just broke. Wow, how does that even happen? Okay, we're back. So in keeping with the theme of this whole video, do it yourself with the minimum of tools on making a river table, putty knife, a cut tube of silicone. So really you just have to make a, you're just trying to create a seal. So you just spread this out as best you can. Silicone, I don't know if you ever work with it or not, it's very gooey, very sticky, so it always pays to have a rag on hand. But when you set this plastic down on top of this wood, you do not want to have any gaps whatsoever, so you have to make sure that you see it squish down, going right to the edge. Now, I would be running like a 1/4 inch, I guess a 1/4 inch bead, you would say. But right now, improvising, I am just lathering it on here so I don't have any leakages. The problem with epoxy is the minimum is 24 hours to dry, so anything can happen within 24 hours. If you're doing a deep pour, it takes days to dry. So if there's a leak, it's going to find it and it's going to leak out all over the floor. And it costs money. This stuff's not cheap. Alright, so I got a nice layer of silicone on both sides. Let me just make sure here. You want to make sure you come back off the thing that you're going to fill far enough so it doesn't squish inside, because epoxy actually does not stick to silicone at all. So that will only create problems. Okay, we're going to put that away. We're going to take our epoxy, wax side down, and we're going to center it up right there. And you can see right through that you're squishing the silicone down. So it's creating a seal all the way down. That's why it's important that your top you're working on is flat. Okay, that's that. That's how we're going to keep the bottom intact after we pour epoxy on it. Next step. Okay, so now I'm just locking this down using the pilot holes and the drywall screws. I'm going to screw it down until you see the silicone squish. Once you see that squish down, you know you're good as far as leaks goes. That's it. I put them like every 6 inches apart. Don't want to go too hard with the impact because it will crack. Okay, so now the piece is together all in one piece, but I wouldn't lift it right now. You definitely have to stabilize it. So I have to find out what I'm going to use for that. Normally, I would use a pretty good sized board to go right across and screw right down through that. That'll keep it from flexing because this is only plexiglass. So I'm just going to get a couple inch screws, screw that on, 4 here, 4 on this side, and that'll keep it from doing this stuff. You don't want that. Plus, when you're ready to pull, I might even put 2 in here, 1 on each side. Okay, I'll bring you back in when I'm getting ready to do the edges. Okay, so now we have a stabilized table. So now we can work on it with confidence that it's not going to bend or flex or leak, which is always the most important thing. It might be awkward. You got to be careful with the plexiglass because it's plexiglass. Okay. Now we just have to cut some strips of flexible plexiglass, which is a little bit lighter than the heavy stuff, which is on the bottom. Fill these in, caulk it all in real nice, so I'm able to work with it there. Sand this whole top down so it's nice and level all the way across. I mean, it's pretty flat all the way across already. It's going to take, you know, the minimal of sanding. I got a little bit thing here I got to deal with. You know, when I say minimal of sanding, I'm talking about at least an hour or 2. Most of it with the belt sander. Starting with 80 grit, working up to, 80, 100 grit, and I don't know if that belt sander goes anymore. And then we'll switch to the palm sander. Get that all nice and smooth. Get all these router bit lines out. That's what all these lines are. They're all from the router bit, going back and forth all those times. But that's going to be it for right now. Next step will be I'll be putting these sides on right here and sealing that all off. So then we'll have everything contained, and then we'll start working on the top, bringing it to life, because once you get this sanded, you'll be surprised how much more detail comes out once you get all these lines off of here. Okay, I'll bring you back in on the next step. Okay, so now what I'm doing is blocking up the dam right here. I am using hot glue, and if it was plugged in, it would be much better. Block off, I'm going to be filling that whole thing up. I use plexiglass with wax on the inside so it doesn't stick. Normally I would shape the plastic to meet the contour of the table edge, but I can do that with the epoxy and a belt sander. So we're going to just glue this baby right in place using hot glue. When it comes to sealing epoxy in, you can never go too over seal. There's no such thing. Stuff leaks, and because it takes so long to dry, that in 24 hours, the slightest little leak will empty out this table while you're sleeping. So it always pays to go overboard when you're sealing any kind of epoxy in an enclosed area. Okay, that's one side there. Okay, now we're on the other side. Run a nice bead of glue right down the bottom edge. And stick it right on, right there. You want to make sure you keep this straight up and down. You don't want to tilt it in or out. Then you'll have to build that back up if you do. So we'll fill this in. We're setting this up so the epoxy goes past the wood here, and then we'll blend it all in on the final sanding. So I'm just building up the glue here, get a nice seal right across the back edge. I don't want to put any on the inside because I don't want that will create a gap on the inside of your pour. Okay, we'll let that fully cure, and then we're going to begin pouring this whole river, probably with a 1/2 inch pour to start out with. I'll bring you back in when we get that. Okay, one very important tip before you pour anything, you always have to make sure that your pieces are exactly level, so all the epoxy does not move to one side. And when I mean exactly in between those two lines. That bubble has to be. Now I'm not worried too much about this way, up and down this way, because it's just a little 3 inch, but from left to right, you don't want a 1/2 inch epoxy on one side and an 1/8 inch on the other side, so you got to be right there. So that's a pretty important point, and it has to be absolutely clean and dust free. All right, I'm going to mix up some stuff, and we're going to pour the first layer.